So when it comes to creating an IoT solution, there is all the story about the backend and the ingestion of data, analytics, and so on. There's one thing actually that we also want to look into, and at Microsoft we take care of for you, or actually try to help you with, is determining the hardware you're going to use. So sometimes you're going to use your own custom hardware, but when you want to go at scale and you're not into creating embedded devices, you might want to leverage hardware from off the shelves or partners, whatnot. In order to help you, we have a catalog of what we call certified for IoT devices. There's like over 500 of them, and we have a website for that, which is the catalog.azure.iotsuite.com, into which you can actually search by type of industry, by device type, by type of connectivity, by operating system. And you can discover more about each of these boards that have been tested, and we validated that they can connect to Azure IoT Hub, hence connect into a remote monitoring solution or Microsoft IoT Central. And in this portal, the things you can look for and search are as diverse as a microcontroller board that actually has some specificities that might actually match my needs for my project. You can also look into gateway type of devices. So if I look at device type here, I click the gateway filter, and I can look at gateways from various companies. I can also interact with the manufacturers. I can actually, from this portal, say, here's my name, here's what I do, my company, I want to be contacted by this company in order to have a demo and have more information and insights into that very board that I'm looking into. Furthermore, I can actually look into get started. I can, for myself, buy off the shelf that board and then follow a very simple tutorial that will let me connect that device and then start sending data up to the cloud. And the last thing that you can look into, actually, which would be of interest, is the operating systems. We do have a wide collection of platforms that are supported from Windows and Linux distributions all the way down to real-time OSs, things like FreeRTOS or embedded RTOS. All of these have been ported to support the Azure IoT connectivity and start interacting with it. So let's say I selected the board, and now what I want to do is go through that first get started tutorial, but I want to learn more about what I can really do, especially if at some point I don't have the board that I want in that collection. I want to connect my own hardware. For that, we have open source SDKs. So you can connect devices using these SDKs to Azure IoT Hub in a very easy and simple way. The SDKs take care of advanced features for connecting you to IoT Hub, but also authenticating and then implementing retry logics, deal with device twins and methods, giving you an abstraction layer to the complexity of the protocol layers that are used underneath. And we do support several languages. We have .NET, Java, we do support JavaScript on top of Node, Python, and obviously C, which is basically the most portable SDK. You can benefit from packages. You can just download the library as a binary, or you can actually download the code and compile for yourself. So if I want to dive into the GitHub repository for the C SDK, for example, I can actually see all the code. Our developers are working in the open. Every other week, we have a new release of these SDKs. We do also have what we call a long-time support branch that allow you to benefit from only getting the security patches and no new features, which is very convenient if you have a long time to support your devices in the field. The CSDK is easily portable. One thing I want to bring your attention on is if you really need to port that SDK to your own hardware because it's not supported by one of the samples or in one of our implementations, then what you can do is look at this porting guide, look at the architecture, and identify what are the PCs you need to port for your specific hardware. So we basically really help you out with all the process when choosing a device, implementing code that will help you connect that device to your IoT Hub and remote monitoring provision suite, and eventually Microsoft IoT Central, all the way down to customizing and porting this SDK for your own need and board. An aspect of an Internet of Things solution that we here at Contoso HVAC do definitely not want to leave aside is the security, the end-to-end security. When it comes to an IT solution, now you have the notion of devices connecting to the cloud, sending data, being controlled, and the data is actually transitioning. There might be some privacy issues and so forth. What I can benefit from is actually from Microsoft is of an end-to-end story around security. Microsoft actually looks at everything in the IoT solution, including device and hardware, all the way up to the cloud. When it comes to the device side of things, we can benefit from a full integration of the IoT Hub SDKs and the service itself with the TPM, the Trusted Platform modules. We can also leverage Secure Boot, BitLocker. We can take advantage of DICE. These are all hardware security features that fully integrate into the authentication mechanism, connectivity mechanism, encryption mechanism that IoT Hub and the SDKs implement for me. In terms of threat resistance, why if I'm using a gateway that is running Windows, eventually I can benefit from all these services that come with Windows. Windows as a service, the firewalls, Defender, that will actually shield my gateway from any sort of attacks. When data is in transition, coming from the devices, from my infrastructure, from my factory up to the public cloud of Azure, well, that data actually, I don't want that to be intercepted. And if it's intercepted, I don't want that to be readable. I don't want someone to be able to get into my private data or my customers' private data. And so for that, Microsoft is implementing in these channels the latest and state-of-the-art encryption using X509 certs and TLS-based handshake for encryption. So that's something that I can really rely on as something that is rock solid. When it comes to cloud security, my data will be at rest, or my customers' data, even worse, is at rest in the cloud. Microsoft ensures, with decades of experience dealing with software and with billions of customers, and now with a cloud solution has been there with lots of services and experience, I can benefit from all of that goodness in my IoT solution. Data is encrypted when it is at rest. I can leverage the Active Directory infrastructure in order to allow access to part of that data. I can benefit from a safe vault or storage for my keys and secrets. And that list goes on and on and on. Last but not least, I need to make sure that my response, as in once I've gotten some insights from the data sent by my devices, and we've been analyzing, we've been determining some action needs to be taken, that response actually needs to be done in a controlled and secure manner. I don't want some man-in-the-middle attack that will actually stop my factory and incur lots of loss in terms of production and money. So what I want to make sure is that I have that infrastructure that is robust, that is secure, that will allow me to control and send these responses to devices, but also to external systems in a safe way. So we realize that Microsoft actually provides all these solutions here at Contoso HVAC, but it's still not easy to implement, and we don't want to miss anything. And so we can benefit from the security program for Azure IoT, which is a matching program. Microsoft will actually pair me with an expert in security, someone who knows security, someone who knows the Microsoft IoT services, and someone who knows my business, my core values. So that way, actually, I can work with that partner in order to implement the most safe and secure IoT solution all the way from device up to the cloud, thanks to this security program for Azure IoT. A very important part of the security story is the device provisioning. You can very easily manually provision one device with its credentials to connect to an IoT hub. But this is something that is very hard to do at scale. When devices come out of the factory, they don't have a credential for connecting to IoT Hub. It would be too hard actually to create these unique credentials for each of these devices and to work with whoever is the hardware vendor or manufacturer to have these credentials flashed on the device. So what you can use actually here at Contoso HVAC, we're looking into device provisioning service, which is an Azure IoT Hub functionality. The device provisioning service is a global endpoint that I can configure as an operator enrolling devices. So devices have usually some sort of unique identifier, a serial number, they have a certificate, they have things like that that will allow me to identify them. So I can enroll these devices into device provisioning service. And I'll show you in a minute how to do that. Once these devices are enrolled, when they come online, they connect to that DPS service. Once again, it's the global endpoint that is available. So all these devices, wherever they are in the world, they can access DPS. They can identify themselves, and there is a notion of challenge that happens under the hoods to verify that the device is the one he's saying he is. And based on that enrollment configuration, DPS will provide credentials for the device to connect to a specific IoT hub of my choice. Once the device has the credentials, it can then, leveraging the IoT Hub client SDKs, connect to their IoT Hub. Let me show you real quick how that looks like. In my subscription for my Contoso HVAC infrastructure, I did create an instance of the device provisioning service. There's a couple of things I want to actually point you to. The first one is the linked IoT hubs. So I can actually set a collection of IoT hubs I want my devices to be connecting to. And so this is where I'm listing these IoT hub devices. That also allows me to kind of restrict access to a defined set of these IoT hubs for my devices that will connect. The next thing that I'm going to work on is enrollments. The first type of enrollment is an individual one. And I'm going to show you real quick the options in there, because that's basically the type of options you have for enrolling your devices. You will pick one of the two mechanisms like X509 or TPM, which are available for enrolling a device. Basically, this is the way the device will identify itself to the DPS infrastructure. I will pick the certificate that I want to use as my root certificate here on the back end, and then I can assign to specific IoT hub for these very enrollment, and then I can pick which device I want to have the enrollment for. This is for an individual one, once again. Another very interesting feature, what I can have DPS do is set a device twin. So that allows me from the get-go, once the device is authenticated, it can also receive a configuration. You can tell it to be in a specific state before it even connects to IoT Hub the very first time. If you want to do that at scale, obviously doing it for each of the device IDs doesn't work. So we have enrollment groups. So the enrollment groups actually will allow you to do that on many devices at once. It's using X509 certs. You create a root certificate, you derive certs for the devices, and then this is the one that's going to get flashed on the device in factory. And you can actually then deal with these enrollments in a big bulk for all of your devices. So you've seen actually you have this UI in the Azure portal, but you can also use scripts using the remote, the resource management infrastructure to configure the enrollment of my devices into Azure IoT.